This is the Aptitude Outdoors podcast, where we interview travelers, explorers, and outdoorsmen and women to bring you the best tips and stories from around the world. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Aptitude Outdoors podcast. If you can help me out, go down below, hit that subscribe button. Today, I welcome back Traci Lynn Martin. She just set the world record for the fastest woman to paddle the Mississippi River, and that's a huge feat, and she has a lot of awesome stories to share, so let's dive right into it. Traci, welcome back to the podcast. Congratulations on completing your world record attempt of the fastest female solo through paddle of the Mississippi River. We had some technical difficulties, people, so I'm sorry. We're doing this round two. But Traci, congratulations. And before we get into the fun details of the trip, what was your inspiration for doing this Mississippi trip after the attempt of all the Great Lakes in one calendar year?
Well, the Mississippi River has always been on my bucket list to paddle from source to sea. It's one of the things I've always wanted to do. I had actually was looking at doing the Inside Passage this year. And with COVID and with Canada being closed, that became an impossibility. So I just turned my focus to the Mississippi River. It's a beautiful river, and I'm really glad that I did that.
Yeah, and the Mississippi is not like, when someone thinks Mississippi River, like me, generally they probably don't think of it as like a scenic, beautiful place. They probably think of it as like heavily industrial. And was that your experience out there, or was it drastically different?
Yeah, so my expectation was that it was going to be really industrialized and pretty much like the lower Missouri, because that's my experience. And I was so incredibly surprised by how beautiful it is, how much wildlife that you can see, and everything. It has swamps, it has sand islands, it has pebble beaches, it has huge tall cliffs. You go through sections that's very, very remote that, you can't get to by land. It's just a really beautiful river, and I'm so happy that I had this experience.
What were some of maybe your favorite sections of the river? Because it's a long distance, so there's definitely going through different landscapes and different cultural regions and all that fun stuff. So what would you say is some of your favorite spots?
I would say early on, the first couple of weeks, I passed through, you have a lot of lakes, and right past Lake Bemidji, there is a section of about 25 miles that's very remote, and it was just full of wildlife. I was just so amazed. And there were multiple times I just put my paddle down, even though it was supposed to be a speed record, and I was just taking pictures on my cell phone. I saw huge, big, round flat turtles sunning on rocks. I saw tiny little turtles hanging on to the river grass, and they would plop off and swim under the water when I would go by. I saw foxes. I saw several porcupines, tons of birds. I saw, ducks and swans and geese and pelicans. And deer, oh my God, tons of deer. Deer would just be standing there drinking, and they would lift their head up and watch me as I went by. And it was it was more beautiful in regards to wildlife of anything I've ever paddled in my life, including the Great Lakes. I've never seen that much wildlife in such a short amount of distance.
That's pretty impressive, because coming from the Midwest, I've rarely seen the Mississippi, and you just think of St. Louis and all these big port cities down in Louisiana. And so, while we're talking about wildlife, you said you ran across some alligators in the southern region. So what was that experience like? Because to me, they're still one of the creepiest animals.
Yeah, very unpredictable, sort of creepy. It's the first time in my life I'd ever seen an alligator live. I'd only seen them on TV. And I was very surprised about how quickly you start seeing them. You start seeing them in the state of Mississippi. I wasn't expecting them until you got closer down to Louisiana. And first you start seeing the signs of them on the sand islands. You see looks like claw marks. and like a long trench going down to the water, and it's their tail that they've dragged. And so I started seeing that really early on in the state of Mississippi. And I remember telling Marv, I said, I think there's alligators out there. And he said, no, you're being ridiculous. There's no alligators. And then it was like 1 or 2 days later, one of the river angels that came out to help us said, oh, be careful with the alligators. They're all over out here. So, and then Marv saw the alligator first. I'd just gotten into the water and paddled off. And he said an alligator popped up and was swimming around where I had just taken off at. So he saw two. And then the third time we all saw when I had pulled off for the night. And I had my boat down by the water. I tried to always keep my boat by the water. And we got up the next day, and I was getting ready to drag my boat back into the water. And I didn't notice it that night because I'd pulled off and it was setting. The sun was setting. It was sort of dark. But there were bones everywhere, fish bones and small animal bones. It was just like a pile of bones everywhere and half-eaten carcasses. And Marv was like, I think we're in someone's territory here. And then this alligator started swimming back and forth, like about 5 or 6 feet from the shoreline, right where I needed to put my water in at, or put my boat in at. And he was very agitated. And so we tried throwing some sticks at him, and he would swim away, and then he'd come back and swim away and come back. And Marv was like, you just got to go. And I'm like, I'm not getting in the water with that thing. So he went back and he got his handgun, and he said, you go ahead and put your boat in the water, and if it charges for you, I'll shoot it. I'm like, well, God, don't miss.
Yeah. You did not want to get shot. No.
It was big. And as I got out into the water and was pulling my boat out, and it dove under the water and it vanished. And so I'm in waist deep water trying to get everything situated on my boat and trying to get into my boat, and we can't see it. And Marv's yelling at me, get in your boat, get in your boat. That was a little hairy.
Yeah, I could imagine that would not be the most welcome feeling when you're standing in the water with an alligator that you can't see. I don't want anything to do with that. That sounds like a bad time. So the other thing that really interested me was going through all these locks and stuff. I mean, that's super foreign to me. I feel like that would be kind of like a somewhat scary experience. So how was that for you? Because there's a ton of them on the river.
Yeah. Really it wasn't that bad. My first lock I went through was on the Great Lakes when I went through the Sioux Lock to get onto Lake Superior. And the more northern regions where the locks start on the Mississippi River, it's very similar to that. You have their phone number for the lock master, so you can call them, or if they don't answer their phone, you can just paddle right up. There's usually a cord, and you pull the cord, and there's a sign there that says pull the cord, and a big alarm goes off, and then they open the gates, you paddle in, they close the gates. They lower you down, and then you paddle on out the other side. So it was fun that I was doing it again. But then the more south you get, the more barge traffic you get, then it can become a little more hairy because, the lock masters, they did an excellent job getting me through as quickly as they could. They knew I was doing a speed record. And sometimes they would have the doors open, the light was green, and they were waiting for me. And other times, they tried really hard to get me through, whereas they might have made someone else in a kayak wait longer. They were able to slip me in between barges. So they tried really, really hard. Sometimes, though, as the barge is leaving, the water gets pretty rough, gets pretty swirly in there. But for the most part, it was a pretty easy process.
And that was another thing I want to ask you about. You had mentioned that there were whirlpools all over the Mississippi, and that the word whirlpool just like has bad connotations. It's just like death swirling water. So what was that experience like? Was it as harrowing as it sounds?
So again, paddling the Missouri, I was used to the whirlpools, and I went onto the Mississippi not concerned at all. And for the most part, you're paddling in your boat, and a whirlpool will pop up. The water's a little bit swirly, and you just get these whirlpools that pop up spontaneously just because of the hydraulics of the water underneath the river. And, you just pretty much float over them. If you need to brace, if they're a little bit bigger, you can brace. And usually it's no big deal. But there were a couple of times, as the barges are going by and some of the bends of the river, it makes them a lot bigger than what I was used to. One section called Victoria's Bend. I was warned beforehand by some local people that it's considered the most dangerous section of the entire Mississippi River. And the barges can only go through one at a time. So they might be stacked up. You have northbound barges and southbound barges, and they're taking turns going through it. And if you've got quite a few barges, backed up and one's going through right after another, the water can be really turbulent. And for me, when I hit that section, one barge had just gone through. I had several barges backed up on each side waiting to go through. And there were huge whirlpools. And what I was used to be like one whirlpool every now and then, these were just like you're going through a section of whirlpools constantly all around you, like one on your right, two on your left, one in front of you, two more pop up on your left, one more pops up on your right, and they're huge. And so my boat was constantly shaking back and forth. It looked like it gave you the feel of going over white water, like I was going over a wing dike. And a couple of times I questioned if I was going over a wing dike because, those can be really dangerous for my boat because of my understern rudder. If I hit a wing dike, at best, it will break the rudder off. At worst, it will punch the rudder up through the back of the hull. And the water was so turbulent, I was concerned that that's what was going on. But it was just that section of river is just very dangerous to go through. And I was scared because I was going through it by myself. But, I got through it.
Well, and, you had mentioned that, during the trip, you've had some, as with any long distance adventure, you're going to have some technical difficulties on the way. So you said you had some issues with your rudder. What happened there and how did you fix that? Because, when you're on the move, that stuff is like, ugh.
Right. So the boat I paddle is a surf ski. It's really long and really narrow, 18 and a half inches wide. And it's designed to be paddled with a rudder. It's not like a sea kayak. Mm-hmm. So when I started the trip early on, I had my overstern rudder, like what most sea kayaks have. By St. Louis, I put on the understern rudder. On day one, when I was trying to drag my boat over beaver dams, it knocked the overstern rudder off. The mechanism snapped and it knocked it off a couple of times. I was able to snap the mechanism back in. And so, it slowed me down a little bit, but not too bad. Once I, more towards the middle end of the trip, the foot pedals that controls the rudder, there's a rod that goes through that and the rod snapped. So then the foot pedals were just dangling and you couldn't use them. I tried using some duct tape in the field to try to get to a boat ramp and get to my support driver. That lasted for like less than an hour. That didn't work. Once I got to my support driver, we were able to get like a clothes hanger wire and put the wire through. And so that sort of kept the foot pedals intact and functional. And at that point, I should have called Stellar Kayaks and had the appropriate equipment mailed to me overnight. But, with everything going on, the wires seemed to work. I sort of put it off. And that was on me. I should not have done that because about 2 weeks later, the wire snapped. And I didn't have any duct tape with me. And there was no way for my support driver to get to me. It was about 11 miles to get to any place that there was a road. So I was in the field and I was, calling my support driver. And I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to get my boat out of here. And the problem is that at this point, you've got multiple barges. It was a lot of barge traffic. And you've got to and think that's what snapped it. A barge went by and I was going over these huge waves and it snapped. Because, the boat was flying up over these huge waves. And I told my support driver, I cannot limp, like before when I tried to duct tape, I was able to sort of limp to a boat ramp. I said, I can't do that now because I have to be able to not float in front of a barge. I have to be able to really navigate this river. So he was trying to find someone that could come out with a boat and so that we could fix it in the field. And in the meantime, I had a little bungee that I had bungeed my shoes on with. I took the bungee off. I opened the back part of the boat that has the mechanism that goes back and forth that controls the rudder. And I was able to use the bungee to manipulate it so that the rudder was always pushing my boat to the left, because that was the side of the wire that snapped. The right side of the wire wasn't holding it well, but it was holding it well enough that I could very gently tap my right foot and move the rudder to the right a little bit. So basically my boat was always going left, and then I could gingerly make it go right by tapping the rudder. And I was able to limp the 11 miles to get back to my support driver. And then we got hold of Stellar, and they mailed me the appropriate equipment. So everything got okay. I think I took one day off for boat repairs for that, though.
I see. That's one of my favorite parts of long distance adventure stories is like things always go wrong, and people, you know, it's like when people watch movies, they're like, oh, why didn't this character do that? But when you're in the moment and you're in your mind, you're like, I'm setting a record, I got to go. And you kind of like let things slide, because it's like, does the time matter more, or does the like being extra cautious and fixing it the right way when it's working now, does that matter more? So it's a lot easier for people to say, oh, well, yeah, you should have ordered the part. But when you're going for a speed record, you're like, well, I don't have time to even think right now. I'm just going. So I love those stories, because you're like, it shows how ingenious people can be in the field when they have to be. Like, I've had backpacks rip apart, and I've sewed them together with like whatever I could find, like cutting apart paracord and cutting apart toothpaste or what's that, dental floss, sewing things together. It's like, you got to make it work, because there's nothing else you can do. The other thing that happened is your entire face swelled up because you got stung. What was that all about? That looked terrible.
Yeah, that was awful. So, you know, I get these really bad reactions to these insect bites. Some people have said I should go on Naked and Afraid, and it's like, no, because my whole body would swell up like one pest pocket once they started biting me. But, you know, it happened on the Great Lakes 3 times. It happened on this trip twice. But the one time an insect stung my eye, and the stinger was left in my eye, and I got cellulitis. But this entire eye swelled shut, and it looked like almost like a chemical burn because there was water under the skin. It looked hideous, and the swelling went up into my forehead and up into my scalp. And it was one of the nights that I was remote camping on a sand island, and the insect had stung me like early in the afternoon. I didn't realize the stinger was still in my eyelid. And I knew that my eye was hurting and throbbing, and I knew there was some swelling going on, but I just, you know, it's just, I took a Benadryl, and it was just, you know, part of just dealing with it. And so that night I landed on the sand island, and I had my tent up, and it was still swollen. And it was swollen like up around here, and my eye was a little bit swollen, but I could still see out of it. And I just figured, you know, it would be okay by morning. And I woke up at 1:00 in the morning, and my entire face felt like it was just throbbing, like the pain was incredible. I realized I couldn't open my eye. I got my cell phone out and put it on video and flipped it around so I could see what was going on, because I didn't have a mirror. And I saw that my eye was swollen shut. My face was horribly swollen. I actually texted my support driver, he was up looking at maps. And I said, hey, you know, my eye is swollen shut. And I texted him a picture, and he was like, oh my God. And like, you need to get medical attention. I'm like, I'm on a sand island in the middle of the night. I'm not going to. He said, get in your boat and paddle to me now. Leave everything there. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. I'll be fine. I'll be fine till morning. And I took some Tylenol and was able to get back to sleep. Woke up the next morning, loaded everything up, paddled on to where he was. In the meantime, I had posted the picture online at 1 a.m. And I think I asked for help. And in the meantime, my sister here in Kansas City saw the picture. She works for an eye doctor. She realized how serious the situation was. She got online. She started calling doctors at the next town I was going to be at. She got me an eye appointment for like 11 a.m. or 11 or noon. I told her what time I thought I was going to be in. She got me an appointment. And then a river angel came and picked me up, Diane. She came and picked me up and took me to the appointment. Well, I got to the eye doctor, and the eye doctor's like, oh, my God, you need to go to the emergency room. You need to have so my eye was swollen shut so bad, and the cellulitis was so bad that had come so quickly. She couldn't pull the stinger out. And she said, you need to go to the emergency room and you need to have them surgically remove this stinger. And you're going to probably need, 1 or 2 or 3 stitches. And I said, okay, I cannot paddle on the Mississippi River with an incision on my eye. I'll get it dirty Mississippi River water and I'll get a horrible infection. I said, I can't do that. I said, can't you just give me some antibiotics? And she was concerned that, that she was setting me up for a really bad infection. And we even had a conference call between her, me, and my sister was on this conference call with us. And so the agreement that we came to was that she would provide me with oral antibiotics and antibiotic eye drops if the infection wasn't getting better in 24 hours, or if it was getting worse, like in 6 or 8 hours, that I promised I'd go to the emergency room and have them manage it medically. But, like I told her and my sister, I said, you get a deep splinter in your finger and you can't get it out. Your body walls it off. And eventually it absorbs or breaks down. I said, won't this do the same thing in my eye? And she was like, yeah, but the infection. I said, okay, so give me antibiotics to deal with the infection and my body will wall off the stinger. Anyways, it worked out okay. So I basically paddled for 3 days with a swollen eye. I couldn't see out of my eye for 3 days. But the swelling up here started going down. The redness, the tightness started going down. So the antibiotics that she gave me 10 days of a really strong antibiotic, and it worked. So I never took a day off for that. Like I took 1 day off for exhaustion and my hands were swollen up so bad I couldn't hold my paddle. And I took another day off because of the rudder or my foot pedals. And I was pretty tired, but I never took a day off for my face being swollen and not being able to see.
Was there any point in that scenario with the eye sting where you were like, this might be the end of it? Was there any like big concern, or were you like, no, I'm just going?
Yeah, for me, there was never a concern that this was the end of it because my body reacts strongly to insect bites like that. This was the second time I had been stung where I swelled up. I had been stung on the side of my face and it swelled up really big. And I didn't make a big deal of it on social media. And on the Great Lakes, it happened 3 times. And so, and when I'm just out backpacking or out hiking and I get stung, sometimes I react really strongly to it. So in my mind, I knew that I would be fine. I knew that this is how my body reacts. My body reacted really, really bad that time though. But I knew I wasn't going to stop paddling. So,
well, yeah. And to step back to what you just said a little bit, it looks like maybe it was like last week you went on a little mini backpacking trip or a hike or something like that you posted. What were you out doing there?
So, I have 3 children, and ever since they were little, I was dragging them on backpacking trips and canoe and camping trips. And now as adults, they hate it and they won't go with me. And my 16-year-old son approached me last week and said, hey, Mom, I would like to go backpacking with you. Would you take me? And I'm like, yeah, I'll take you. Let's go. So we went to the store and I got him his own backpack and got him all of his supplies. And we went up. There's a state park called Ha State Park out past Sedalia in Missouri. And we spent 3 days up there backpacking and camping, and I had a really great time with it. So it was wonderful spending that time with my son.
Was it good to get on your feet for a while instead of sitting in a kayak all day?
Well, I think I would prefer being in a kayak. I have rheumatoid arthritis, so it really affects my feet, ankles, and knees. And I used to love backpacking, and I used to love, running, and it's hard doing that stuff now. So my son was absolutely amazing. He's 16 and really strong. And, there was a couple of times, and I had my pack probably like 45 pounds in my pack. So it was pretty heavy and way too heavy for 3 days. But so I basically, a couple of times I said, hey, I need to rest. I can't keep going. And he was like, well, I'll carry your pack for you, Mom.
That's it. You need to use that more often. You just carry it for me the whole time. This will be a great trip.
It was one of the best times that I've had with him. Well, I guess this year, but it was great.
Yeah, it's always good to get out with in family, especially when like they don't like to do something and all of a sudden they show interest. You're like, yes, this is what I've been waiting for. So back to the kayaking trip. Were there any significant, gear changes from when you were doing the Great Lakes paddle, or is it all pretty much the same? I know we talked about that in detail the last time we talked, but is it mostly the same stuff?
Yeah, it was mostly the same stuff. With the Great Lakes, I would be out for longer trips without my support driver. There would be like 5 days I was out without seeing anyone, another time 6 days out without seeing anyone. The longest I ever went without seeing my support driver. Well, I never went more than, I always saw my support driver every day. I didn't always stay the night in the trailer. But there was never a section that I wasn't able to see him at least at some point, either for lunch or for dinner, or, I might have taken off from him in the morning, camped overnight, and saw him again the next afternoon. So I didn't have to carry as much gear. I tried to keep my boat a lot lighter. I probably carried less gear. I carried less food. Oh, the biggest thing though was water. I filtered all my water on the Great Lakes. So I had like one water bottle for water that I would maybe put like instant lemonade or Kool-Aid or something. And I had one water bottle for tea, for instant tea. I filtered all of my water from the Great Lakes. I didn't carry any water with me. And that was a huge thing that took up a lot of weight, was I had to carry all of my water with me on the Mississippi River. You can't filter that water. I was told it's not safe, and I wasn't going to take the chance and get sick. And on top of that, we're talking about temperatures that were 90 and 100 degrees. So I was going through fluid like you can't believe. I was carrying Gatorade with me. I was carrying tons of water with me. I was carrying like lemonade, and I was carrying tea, and I couldn't keep the fluids down fast enough. And all of that weight really took a toll on what I was carrying. So what I was able to compensate for not carrying so much gear, I actually ended up carrying more fluid and water with me, trying just to stay hydrated.
Yeah, and in these like really hot temperatures, even like we're having right now, it's so vital to stay hydrated. Like I would say, from what I've seen, it's really a factor that gets a lot of people to either like have to get off of a trip or whatever because they just aren't paying attention to the water needs. And yeah, when it's hot, you need so much water. Like I just went mountain biking yesterday. It was like an hour and a half, and I was so dehydrated by the time I got done after drinking water the whole time. And so yeah, it's definitely super important. And that was what I was going to ask, is like, could you filter the Mississippi water? Cause like, it's no way.
Yeah. Well, it's really dirty. It's got a lot of mud in it. If you're backpacking and that's the only water source that you have, you could probably filter it and then use your tablets. That's what I would do. If that was absolutely the only source I had, first I'd filter it, and then I'd put my tablets in it and wait 4 hours before I drank it. But I didn't have the luxury to take that chance, because this is a speed record. I needed to stay healthy. I needed to stay moving. I couldn't be like, rolled up somewhere with GI issues because I drank something with drink. And especially, some of the areas, there you could see maybe some pollution being dumped into the water from some of the factories further down south. Maybe up in the northern parts, it might have been okay to have filtered the water and drank it, but still there's so much mud and silt that it would probably clog up your filters pretty quickly anyways. But I did not. I chose to carry all of my water. And that was something, at the Great Lakes, the temperatures up north are a lot cooler. So one, I was dealing with a lot hotter temperatures. Two, once I got really south, there were alligators. And so I chose not to get into the water to cool off with the alligators. So I was drinking a lot and carrying a lot of fluids.
Yeah, and you had mentioned that, you had taken the 2 days off. Did you take any more days off at all, or did you just paddle straight through every day since it was a speed record?
Yeah, I paddled through every day. I only took 2 days off.
Wow.
One day was just pure exhaustion. My hands were swollen up so bad that I couldn't hold the paddle. And I woke up that day and I told my support driver, I said, this needs to be a short day. I'm just, find a place that I can just do maybe 5 or 10 miles so I can do something. And I went back to sleep. And when I woke up later and he said, just sleep. He said, there's really no place. You're going to have to go at least 20 miles. Just sleep. We'll take a day off. And then the second time was with the pedals. My hands were swollen and I was starting to get some nerve damage on my left hand because the way I hold my paddle, my right hand twists. So I'm constantly moving it. My left hand holds the paddle and never moves. So I was starting to get some nerve damage on my left hand. It was pretty swollen. And so I decided maybe it'd be in my best interest just to take a second day off. So yeah, I paddled the Mississippi River in 55 days, 8 hours and 17 minutes. And in that time, I took 2 days off.
That is grueling and impressive. That's so awesome. When you have to take those days off, because like thinking back to when I was doing the Appalachian Trail, like, do you ever feel guilty like on those days, like, oh, I could be moving right now? Or is it just like, I know I need this, I'm just going to just chill?
I felt guilty both days. The day that I took off because I was just physically exhausted and hurting, I have rheumatoid arthritis and scleroderma. And not only does it cause pain, it causes fatigue. And I was trying to push myself mentally through the fatigue. And my body was really starting to react poorly. And so I took the day off because I really needed to, but I felt incredibly guilty that I did. And then the day for the equipment, I felt really, really guilty, And I felt like I should have been out there, and I felt like, I should have been on top of the ball, and I should have ordered the supplies sooner. And you second guess everything. And so, yeah, in my head, I think, maybe I could have done this in 54 days or 53 days. And then there's other things too, like I would pull off and it was like 6 p.m. and I'm hurting and my hands are swollen. And I think, maybe instead of pulling off and staying with the support driver in the support truck at 6 p.m., maybe I should have went ahead and paddled till 9 p.m., camped on an island somewhere, and I could have been one day ahead, So you second guess everything you do, but it is what it is. And I set the record and I'm happy with that.
Yeah. And it's so funny because that's just how our minds work as humans, I think, because it's the same way, even when you're training for something like this, like, oh, when you get home, it's so easy to say, I could have went harder. But when you're in the moment, you're like, I'm going to die. I feel like absolute crap. And like, this is not like going at all how I thought it was going to go. So yeah, so you essentially beat what you wanted to set by almost 4 days. Cause I think you said 61 was like the hard goal you wanted to beat.
Yeah. 61 days was the hard goal that I needed to do. There was a woman kayaker that had paddled the Mississippi River in 61 days. She originally was planning on setting a Guinness record. She's the one that contacted Guinness to have the record set up for a female solo kayaker. And within a couple of days of starting her journey, she decided it was just too much documentation and she wanted to focus on enjoying the trip and not on all the documentation required by Guinness. And I totally understand and support that decision of hers. And I know a lot of people out there feel the same way, that the journey should be more important than all the documentation. But I had a lot of people helping me with the documentation. I encouraged people to support, post things on Facebook, which I was able to pull off and use. But yeah, so she did it in 61 days. And I felt like to have a legitimate record, I needed to beat 61 days, and I did it in 55.
That's awesome. Was the Guinness documentation kind of a pain in the ass? I know it seemed like you posted a lot. Like you were almost posting every day, it seemed like. Was it a huge hassle?
Oh my, yeah, it was absolutely a huge, big hassle. So I had my support driver. We had to print off these forms from Guinness for witness statements. And my understanding from the Great Lakes, because I was trying to set a record in a surf ski for the Great Lakes, was that you had to have 2 witness statements a day. So I had printed off like 300 witness statements, and we were like trying to get people every day, 2 people a day, to sign that they saw me on the Mississippi River, and having all of that paperwork with us. And then on top of that, I had 2 spot trackers. I had my spot global tracker, then I had my inReach tracker. And I'd hired a company called RaceOut to manage all that data for me. And then just trying to take the videos. I was doing videos every day, 10, 15 minutes of videos every day on my phone and on my GoPro, and pictures. And it was huge. It really does take away from the trip. It does. But, you have to do it if you're planning on setting a record. I'll probably never do something like this again. I think from here on out, I just want to enjoy the journey. So we'll see.
Yeah, it seems like it would almost make your trip more difficult, because you're basically having to document, and it's like working a part-time job while you're out there doing the big things. And so sounds like Marv had his work cut out for him as well.
He was an angel, man. He was a trooper. He was up late at night trying to go over the charts, because I had charts of the entire upper and lower Mississippi River, huge big books, huge charts that I purchased. He was going through the charts, trying to figure out places he could pull me out at, trying to figure out places he could resupply me at during the day. And he was trying to manage all of the paperwork, all the Guinness documentation. He was managing the GoPros and managing the data from the GoPros. And he was stressed that entire 2 months. He was stressed, but took a lot of the work off of me.
Yeah, it's good to have a teammate like that who can really help you with your goals, because you're focusing on the hard paddling, big miles, and just staying laser focused on that goal. What were, you obviously pushing big miles every day to get this completed. What was kind of your average mileage daily?
Up north, I was averaging about 35 miles a day. And further south, I was averaging about 50 miles a day, I guess. My biggest miles was when I paddled into Memphis, Tennessee. And I think that was 72 miles.
Wow. That is huge. That's a lot of miles. Was there any significant difference in the water, movement compared to the Great Lakes? I mean, was the river moving at enough current that it helped you, or is the Mississippi dammed up so much that it's like paddling a lake?
So, yeah, that was a huge mental roadblock that I had to get over, because in my mind, I knew the upper Mississippi was going to be slow and less than 1 mile per hour current. But in my mind, I thought the lower Mississippi, once I got past St. Louis and you had the Ohio River and the Missouri River flowing into the Mississippi, I thought it was going to be like here in Kansas City on the Missouri River, where it flows at 3 and 4 miles an hour. And, you easily paddle 7 and 8 miles an hour. Once I hit St. Louis, and because my whole mind, I was like pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. I was in pain and my hands were swollen. I just kept saying, once I hit the Missouri River, this is going to be so much easier. I'm going to be going so much faster. I won't be struggling so hard. Once I hit the Ohio River, and I hit those rivers, and there was no change. There was no change in the amount of current that I was getting, maybe from 1 mile an hour. If you're not paddling, maybe from 1 mile an hour to maybe 1.5 or 1.6 mile an hour when you're not paddling. And that is not what I was expecting at all. And I hit a huge mental, like a breakdown. Like I was just like, I told Marv, I was just like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do this in the time frame that I want to do this in? I said, my body is falling apart. My hands are swollen. I'm in pain every day. How am I going to do this? And basically I just had to get up and just keep going out there and just keep doing it. But it was hard because I was expecting, in my head, I thought once the Missouri flows into the Mississippi, I'm just going to be flying at like 8 miles an hour.
That I had a similar experience when I kayaked here locally in our local Maumee River. We had the opposite. Basically, like at the beginning, the water was moving so fast, and we were just like, you basically could not paddle and just go the whole day, and we were making good miles because we were paddling, so we're hitting like 45-mile days and all this awesome stuff, and we're like, sweet. And then we hit the dams, and it went from like that to 0 miles an hour, and we're just crawling. So I can relate a little bit, but not in the amount of mileage. Yeah. So I don't want to keep you too long because I already messed up the first half of this podcast and you got places to be. So, I just want to thank you for coming on and sharing your awesome story. And I just can't wait to see what you're doing next because you're always doing cool stuff. And I love talking to people who have done awesome adventures. And so I know you literally just finished, but do you have anything coming up that's maybe your mind's thinking of like, I could do this next time?
Yeah. So what I would like to do next year is to paddle the upper Missouri and start at the Jefferson River. And I won't do the whole Missouri because I've paddled most of the Missouri across the state of Missouri. And, I've done a lot of the lower Missouris, but I've always wanted to do the upper Missouri. Here it's beautiful. And there's a section called the Breaks, which is supposed to be the most beautiful section of river of the entire continental U.S. and on the Missouri River. So that's my goal for next year. But my big goal, that's not really going to be an expedition. It's going to be about maybe 3 or 4 weeks. It's going to be more like a bit of an extended vacation. But in 2023, my big expedition that I'm going to revisit and work towards doing as long as Canada has completely opened up its borders is to go ahead and do the Inside Passage in the Yukon River. That was what I had wanted to do this year. I want to start in Seattle and paddle the entire Inside Passage. And then I have a river angel or a friend up in northern, up there in Alaska that's going to help transport my boat to the Yukon River, to the source of the Yukon River, and then paddle the Yukon River and just sort of see how far I get. I don't know if I'll get all the way. It just depends on time. But there's a lot of logistics. That's going to be similar to the Great Lakes as far as logistics. Wow. And so that's hopefully is going to be my goal for 2023. I actually have already purchased a Kruger boat. It's called a Dreamcatcher. And that's going to be my boat of choice for this expedition because it's going to be a huge expedition. There's not going to be a lot of places to resupply at. So I need a boat that has the space to carry everything that I'm going to need. And I'm actually, Marv, my partner, has actually shown some interest in maybe going with me. And so I'm actually in negotiations with a person right now to buy a second Dreamcatcher so he can go with me. And the great thing about these Dreamcatchers, it's a Verlin Kruger boat, is that they're designed for ocean paddling. So they sit up really high in the water. Mm-hmm. They can carry up to about 500 pounds worth of gear, food, supplies, water, whatever you need. They're a huge boat. It's like an ocean design boat. And if you paddle at the end of the day and you don't feel like setting up your camp, you can slide down inside of them and sleep inside of them if you want to. And they're designed so that two dream catchers can be combined, held together with like an aluminum, like a pole, and you can turn them into a catamaran and paddle together, which makes them more stable if you're paddling in really rough ocean water. So the plan is that during the inside passage, if it's a calm day, we'll paddle separate. If it's a rough day, we'll put the two boats together and paddle together like a catamaran. And then on the Yukon River, we'll paddle separate.
That I've never heard of that. That sounds so awesome.
Yeah.
I have one last question for you, and this is going to be the hardest question. Because it is going to be the worst question because I don't know how to answer it myself. But why do people like us keep doing these things? Because they hurt and they're terrible sometimes, and they're not always the most fun. But like I can't stop. I love doing stuff that's hard and just not always the most fun. So why do we keep going?
To experience life. I mean, that's living. For me, the definition of living is to be outside and to see beautiful things and to see amazing things. And, to stand on top of a mountain that's taking you all day to climb and to look over, you're on the summit and to look out over the land, or to be on an island that you've taken all day to paddle to. And, you're the only person on this island, and to see the wildlife, to be sitting in your boat when it's raining on you and to experience the cold rain hitting you and to watch the little rain droplets bounce up off of the water. I mean, these are magical moments, and it's magical moments that you can't appreciate by watching someone else do it on TV. It's magical moments that you can't appreciate by watching a YouTube video. I've seen alligators on TV, but to actually in real life see an alligator swimming back and forth, not wanting me to put my belt in the water. I mean, that's a spectacular feeling, a moment that can never be replaced by watching it on TV. And I want to live my life for as long as I can, with my rheumatoid arthritis and my scleroderma. If I live long enough, the scleroderma will eventually kill me. I'll probably have some type of respiratory issues, and it will eventually kill me. My lungs won't be able to expand and oxygenate anymore. And, the rheumatoid arthritis is going to affect my mobility. But for as long as I can keep going out and doing things, I want to live, and I want to experience it myself and not experience it through, watching a YouTube video, I guess. That's me. But, there's nothing wrong with people that want to watch it through a YouTube video. Before I die, though, I want to do it myself. I don't know.
That might be the best answer I've ever heard to that question. So I 100% agree with you. I'm the same way. I feel like I constantly, every time I'm going through a hard thing, like I just started getting into like adventure racing and stuff and all this like hard mountain biking. And it's like, why do I do this? And I'm like, well, you only live one time. So you better make it count, or you don't want to look back and just be like, I didn't do anything. I want to look back and be like, I lived. So I'm 100% with you on that. And I want more people to hear that message, because I think it's the most important message we have here on our short lives we have. So thank you so much, Traci. Okay.
Actually, if I could say one more thing.
Yeah.
My people that live with chronic pain and chronic fatigue, because sometimes the chronic fatigue is worse than the chronic pain, because you can take your ibuprofen, you can sort of push through the pain. It's really hard to push through chronic fatigue. And my message to individuals suffering out there is your life doesn't have to be over. And, I'm not saying you have to run out and paddle the Mississippi River, but maybe if you can find the energy and the drive to get in your car, if you live by the Mississippi River, and just drive and sit on a bench and watch the river flow by, or just to, like right now I'm sitting outside in the garden outside. If you can just get up and get outside. I feel like nature is a huge healing presence. And even if you can't paddle, if you can just sit outside, if you can just be outside, feeling the wind on your face or the sunlight on your skin, you'll feel better, and never think that your life is over. There's always, I can't imagine the worst depression and the worst hopelessness than to think that your life is over, and sitting in the chair and watching TV is the best that you can do. And my message to people is never give up on yourself. I mean, just don't give up on yourself. I don't know. That's my message.
I think that's a great message. I 100% agree with that. So before we take off here, Traci, why don't you let people know where they can learn more about your adventure and your website and your Facebook and all that fun stuff, and we'll wrap her up.
So I have a website. It's called Just Around the Point, and you spell point, point, P-O-I-N-T-E. So it's Just Around the Point. I haven't done a lot of updates with it. It's all about the Great Lakes. A lot of cool pictures and videos from my 2017 expedition. All the pictures and videos from the Mississippi River is on my public Facebook group, which is Just Around the Point, P-O-I-N-T-E. You can see dozens of videos, and actually hundreds of videos and pictures. I'm actually in the process of finishing up a book about the Great Lakes. So anyone interested in my 10-month expedition around the Great Lakes, that will be information about that will be on both the website and my Facebook page. And and then my next the Missouri River trip will be on Facebook, and then the my expedition, I'm calling it Points North, and Point is P-O-I-N-T-E. So Points North with the Inside Passage in the Yukon River will be on Facebook as long as I have some type of cell service.
All right. Well, Traci, thank you so much. Thank you for coming back on and dealing with my questions. And I can't wait to see what you do next.
Can I add one more thing real quick?
Yeah.
I would like to thank every single river angel out there who helped me. This trip could not have been possible, or could not have been as successful without all of the river angels out there helping me, giving me places to stay at, giving me more places to stay at, providing us with the information. Just the information alone that people provided us with was just a godsend. And I truly appreciate every single river angel out there who helped me and provided me with information, provided me with, a cup of hot coffee, or, brought me a McDonald's fish sandwich down at the riverbank. And there's a lot of people that I really hope know how much I appreciate them, that I'm sure will never see this podcast. They don't do Facebook. They said they heard about me in the newspaper and saw that I liked McDonald's fish sandwiches, and this lady just brought me. And I really appreciate everyone out there that has helped me.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Traci, and I appreciate your time and everything that you're doing. So keep it up. It's awesome.
So much.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching this episode of the Aptitude Outdoors podcast. If you can, help me out, go down below, hit that subscribe button. I'd greatly appreciate it. I want to take a minute here to thank Traci for coming on yet again and sharing her stories. I mean, what a harrowing attempt with all the stuff that went wrong and only taking 2 days off. That is incredible. So great job, Traci. If you want to learn more, you can go down below and you can get links to all of her pages and social media and stuff. And as always, I want to thank you all for watching or listening to this podcast. I'll see you next time.